Let's go, Rider Nation.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Get the feeling now. Get 'em high, get 'em low. 'Cause we're dealing now. Everybody's giving it all they got. 'Cause we're ready.
This is the Piffles podcast, your Saskatchewan Roughriders fan podcast. Thanks for joining us here this week on a very busy show. You got me, I'm Alex.
I'm Steve.
And I'm beat. It was a long day of coming home from work, going to DQ, having some of the great food, having a blizzard, trying to do a live stream that I may have messed up, then had to fix and redo
Twice.
and then going to the draft. Well, not really draft party anymore. And then hanging out with J.O. and Mace. And then coming home, and now we're doing this. Like, we suffer for you guys. You understand that, right?
Hard lives we live.
It's a struggle every damn day.
Well, as we record this, it's draft day in the CFL. The draft has ended, and we were at the Riders draft party, which we'll talk a little bit about. But we want to thank everybody for joining us here on the show, listening wherever you get your favorite podcasts, watching on YouTube or SaskTel Max TV on demand. Piffles podcast, of course, is brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sask Drive in Regina. Just want to point out that it was a score blizzard tonight for me, so that was it's been a good day.
It's cotton candy blizzard for me. Those are delicious.
Nothing
Never a
tops
bad
s'more.
choice.
I'm so glad the s'more blizzard is back, even though it's a limited time, but it's awesome.
You're going to be there quite often.
Probably.
You can give us a follow on social media. You know where to find us, Piffles Pod, everywhere you go. Piffles Podcast is also proud to be sponsored by Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty, Churchill Brewing Company, District 306, Regina's Tactical Laser Tech Experience, and Bigfoot Vodka. This is the last show of April. We took last week off because I wasn't really feeling it. And honestly, I couldn't try and figure out an hour worth of content for one signing. So I'm kind of glad we took last week off with the draft this week. A lot of news to talk about. So we should probably just jump right into it. Let's get to the opening kickoff. All right, I'll leave it up to you guys here. Do you want to start with the draft, or do we want to go to some of the other news that happened last week?
I say let's get the draft out of the way.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
So the draft, and we'll go with the global draft first because that happened first, and that will be done in about 30 seconds here.
We could just punt that one out of the way.
Yeah. Lots of punters. Only one for the Riders, though, in the second round, Jesse Murko out of Vanderbilt. They had a highlight pack of them on the Riders posted. There was a guy kicking a football. That's what it was. What that shows me is that the Riders are going to ensure that that punter spot remains a global spot. They already had 3 on the roster with Corsack, Couch, and Bailey, right?
Yeah, Bailey. Yeah, who's the
And,
one?
now they have
the one we just signed yet.
And now they have a 4th. So it's going to be a punter spot.
Exciting stuff.
But I did like in the first round, they took a defensive lineman, Sylvan, and I am gonna butcher his last name. They took a guy named Sylvan out of Georgia Tech. He's Belgian. Hopefully he can be the next Habakkuk Baldonado, because we saw him take that step in 2024, and I was hoping that they'd, maybe take a D lineman or one of the skill players, again in air quotes using skill players. And that's what they did.
I just find it funny. They brought in 3. The only global position players they brought into the combine were receivers, and not a single one got taken.
Yeah.
Poor Tommy Wilson.
And a shout out to Rob Banstone. According to him, Sylvan is the first Belgian-born player to ever play for the Riders. So, of course, he would have that information because it's Rob Vanstone.
And there is your 2024 global or 2025 global draft for the Riders. So 2 rounds, defensive lineman, and a punter.
Can we do away with the global draft at this point? There was 11 different kicker punters taken this year. 4 different teams took 2 punters or kickers.
And I wrote about
Joke.
that. I wrote about that a little bit, where to me, that's the lazy thing. It's the token spot now. It's that 7th Canadian starter, the receiver that you're just going to put out on the wide side of yesteryear, what that used to be. This is just, we have to have a global on the roster. Screw it. He could probably kick a ball. Let's put him there. To me, it's lazy. It's lazy scouting. It's lazy GMing. And the teams that are only picking punters every single year, that's lazy. Where you can find defensive linemen, especially with the pathway program they have in the NFL and these guys playing in NCAA colleges. Like the defensive lineman we took is out of Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a pretty solid NCAA football school. Why not take a shot on one of those guys?
Yeah, there's players out there. Like the NCAA has hundreds and hundreds of players. There has to be someone out there that can do more than kick a ball. And you're right. It shows how lazy some of these teams and how unserious they are about this entire thing. They just show up, go take it. Who's a kicker on this list, and you take them. I don't know.
Well, in
I
Edmonton,
wish more guys would take it seriously.
I legitimately wonder if teams are even looking into the kickers they're taking, or if they're just looking at a page full of kickers and punters and going, yeah, he's from Australia, he's from Ireland, let's take them. Because that's the extent of it. And it's not a good look for the league. If you're going to do this global draft, do it properly. Otherwise, it's turning into an embarrassment. Well, it always has been, but you find the odd diamond in a rough, like the Japanese player for the Bombers, or Habakkuk Baldonado. You find the odd guy who can play. Find them.
like keep your one position as a punter. That's fine, but do you need to draft 2 every single year? Like, how bad is your scouting to have to do that? I don't know. But anyway, that's the global draft for you, which new commissioner Stuart Johnson says is not going anywhere. They're keeping that around, and I'm fine with it. Just I want to see some GMs take some shots here and uncover some stars.
But what's the worst thing that could happen? You take a shot on a guy like a Tommy Wilson over just some random punter. Like, you never know what he might bring to camp. I just don't get it.
On the plus side, we've now spent more time talking about the global draft than probably 7 or 8 of the GMs. So
come here to the Piffles podcast for all your global draft CFL needs. But it's all about the Canadian draft. And that was the big one that happened this afternoon, Tuesday afternoon at 4:00, so that we could all watch the Toronto Maple Leafs continue their descent and choke away another playoff series. So that was nice.
But before we get that, CFL, fix your crap. Like, my Lord, that trying to follow along online, your draft tracker didn't work. It was stuck on round 2 for hours. Your social media was behind, like 2 rounds behind every single team. It was hard to follow. It should not be that hard to follow the draft. For people that want to follow it, I understand we are diehards, but it was getting really confusing because I was talking to some other people. I'm like, hey, you drafted this guy in the 7th round. Oh no, they're only on round 5. I'm like, no, they're not. You're 2 rounds behind me. Like, get better at this. It's not that hard.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. And that's the CFL in a nutshell. So the draft tracker sucked. That was brutal. But what we're all here for, what the Riders did in the draft, So going into the draft, I wrote that there wasn't a real pressing need. Sure, there was some positions that you could probably look at that, okay, there's not a lot of depth there. Maybe that's what they want to approach, like defensive line, only having 3 Canadian defensive linemen on the roster prior to the draft. And that's exactly where they went first. So round 1, the Riders took a defensive lineman, Ali Saad, out of Bowling Green State. This is a big dude, 6'3", 280. He's going to be a defensive tackle. So what to me this does is sets it up for 2026. This is a move for next year. So right now you have Mike Rose and Micah Johnson. How long are both of those guys realistically going to play? How long is Micah Johnson going to keep doing 1-year contracts? This could be his last kick at the can, right? Well, that leaves Charbel De Beers the next guy up, possibly if you want to flip the ratio. Well, he needs some help around him, another depth piece, a backup to be able to flip the ratio. This is where Saad comes into play. So to me, I really like taking a defensive lineman. Would I have taken one in the first round? I don't know. But our head coach is a defensive lineman by trade. So I'm not surprised by them going D-line first pick. But let me get your guys' thoughts on taking Ali Saad.
I was kind of shocked because on many mock drafts, on many rankings, he wasn't the.
Oh, is Greg stuck? Oh, there you go.
You guys disappeared from my screen, so I have no idea what just happened there.
That's a shame. We disappeared. We were stuck looking at you.
I bet.
We got the short end of that stick.
Anyway, he was not the top D lineman on many mock drafts and many rankings, but everything I've read up on this guy, according to some scouting reports, he's probably the most pro ready right now. So he might be on the roster as early as this year.
I'll admit he's a guy that I didn't really look into a lot of because he was that guy that was slipping kind of down into that late first, early second round or later spots in all the mock drafts. So he kind of slipped by me. I looked into, your Parrish Shands and your Hayden Harrises, but the more I looked into this guy, the more I'm kind of excited to see what he can do. We need that big body in the middle, not just short term, but again, like Alex alluded to, that long-term replacement for a guy like Micah Johnson who can take up a ton of space. Not that we expect this guy to come in and be like Micah Johnson, because there is only one Micah Johnson. The later we get into the evening, the more excited I get about this pick. I think it'll be a good one. And if it's a guy that can come in and be ready for camp, that is a necessity. That's a problem this team has had. We are still waiting on Kyle Hergel from last year's first round, and we'll probably be waiting a little while longer. They need this guy, whoever it is. That first round pick has to be here next month.
So Saad, who played he played in a 3-4 defense. So that's 3D line, 4 linebackers. And so he played nose tackle. He played on the end a little bit as well too. So this is a guy that can move around on that D line. And Marshall Ferguson was talking about him during the draft show and saying that he's kind of a toy that you can kind of move around and play with and have linebackers, come over top and rush the quarterback as well too. So this is a guy that you're going to look to plug holes with, fill the gaps. And if you can get, who was the last good D lineman that the Riders drafted pretty high overall? Keith Sholigan, probably. If you can get a guy like Sholo coming back, that's pretty good to me. Second round, they stayed in the trenches, but flipped to the offensive side. Went with offensive lineman Eric Anderson out of Western University. This is another big guy, 6'6", 314. He does have a New York Giants rookie minicamp invite. So those, traditionally don't really amount to much. But this is a guy that can probably come in this year. Won't be here for camp, but come in at some point during the season and be on the practice roster and just provide more depth. And you can never have too many offensive linemen, which we saw last year.
Well, to the point where even the other fans, when asking O'Day and Mace about how many offensive linemen we went through at the draft party. Um, but yeah, like you depth and the trenches is where you need to go in this league if you want to succeed. And so that's why they're the top two off the board right now for us.
And O'Day commented on that when he was asked about this at the post draft event today. He said that the trenches is exactly where they needed to fill holes. This is, or not fill holes, sorry, where they needed to add depth because of what they went through last year. And he did mention that what we've gone through the last few years, injuries have been a problem. And to be able to prepare for that with, a couple of high quality draft picks in a spot of need while having a few veterans for those guys to learn from is, fantastic. There was some question marks here at, when we were talking as we were driving to the event, Alex, that, that spot was the perfect spot to take a guy like Jackson Finley, who had slid down to, I think he ended up going, was it 18th, 19th? Somewhere in that
16th with the trade for the BC Lions. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
BC traded up to get him.
This was that spot where you looked maybe at getting him, but it's clear that the trenches is where they wanted to fill those first two roles.
So on the offensive line, where does that leave the Riders? Well, you have Logan Furland, Philippe Gagnon, and Sean McEwen as the starters. You have Braden Knoll as depth. Zach Fry probably as the sixth man to at least start the season. You have Noah Zur there as well, who played a little bit last year. Last year's, I think it was 5th round draft pick, Daniel Johnson, will be back in camp. He was on the practice roster last year. And now you have Eric Anderson as well, through a little bit down the road. He might be won't be here right off the bat, but probably be here at some point early in the season. So he's a guy that can kind of push, maybe not this year, but next year for that 6th man spot. That's kind of what you're hoping for anyway. Realistically, to start, you don't want to, Josiah St. John a guy and just have him start right off the bat and not be ready. Like that it doesn't work out well in the CFL that way. So the nice thing is that they didn't need to get somebody that has to make an impact right now.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. And that was after our conversation with Luke. The CFL draft is a draft where you're planning for the future, not for a guy you need right now. If you start drafting for guys you need right now, you're in a lot of trouble. You want that succession plan as you go forward.
It's so different than the NFL draft. The NFL draft, your first 3, almost 4 picks, you're expecting to be day one starters. So it's very different. The 3rd round, that's where it got interesting here in Saskatchewan. Did not see this happening. Very happy it did. Curtis Rourke, quarterback out of Indiana. Of course, the younger brother to Nathan Rourke, BC Lions quarterback. Curtis played most of last year on a partially torn ACL. Missed the last bit of the year with that torn ACL. Was in a
Heisman hunt.
He was in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy. Got drafted in the 7th round by the San Francisco 49ers, so he's not coming up here anytime soon. This is a move for 2-3 years down the road is what it is. But when you look at what the Riders have at quarterback, you have Trevor Harris, who is 39 years old, pushing 40 anyway. He'll
be 40 during the season.
Yeah. You have Jake Mayer, and then you have a short yardage guy like Tommy Stevens behind him, and then you have 2 unknowns with Cone and Hires. So there has to be some sort of succession plan. Greg, you mentioned that word already. And Curtis Rourke comes with a lot of hype. He's supposed to be better than Nathan Rourke. So I like the idea of taking somebody here and to get arguably the best quarterback in the draft. Well, it was really him or Taylor Elgersma. I don't mind taking the chance here, especially when your first 2 guys could probably be on the team to kind of start the year. I don't mind the 3rd round pick being a futures pick.
If you're going to make that futures pick, first of all, I love it being in the 3rd round, not the 1st or 2nd. I'm not a big fan of, and I've expressed this many times, the Kyle Hergel pick from last year, making that reach in the first round for a guy that you hope shows up. As a 7th round pick, you know they're going to spend some money on him. They're going to give him a shot to make the roster. So he's going to be a 2, 3, maybe even longer project down the line. The 3rd through 7th is where you spend those picks. And I love it, just if nothing else, for the hype that he comes with, the energy that you heard it when they talked about it at the event today. The crowd was pumped for it. And I'd be shocked if 10% of those people have seen Curtis Rourke play, like on TV or elsewhere. So to get that kind of excitement that quickly is a good thing. And it can only grow from there if he does ever actually come north to Saskatchewan.
I think if you had to give Jo some truth serum, I think you would be hoping that Elgersma was at that pick, because I think you have a better chance of him showing up before Rourke did. But when Winnipeg obviously had that extra pick in the 2nd round, it just made sense that Winnipeg also has an aging quarterback who has had some of his best years behind him already. So they're looking for that succession plan as well. Speaking of which, can you imagine an all-Canadian quarterback Labor Day Classic?
Oh, yeah. Rourke against Elgersma? That'd be pretty cool. And then that possibly sets up a potential Rourke versus Rourke.
Yeah.
So the
The
rivalry, the rivalry with BC could be back. We haven't seen that since, the early or late 2000s. Early 2010s, right? Like
Those were good times. I'd like to bring those back.
Get off the field, Wally chants. That was one of my
It
favorite
really
things
hasn't been
year, was being able to talk to Wally and ask him about those chants. So Riders going with the quarterback Curtis Rourke, really intriguing there. But again, that's a futures pick. I really like their 4th round pick. Really, really like this pick. This is linebacker Seth Hundeby from the U of S Huskies. He's going back to the U of S to finish off his engineering, so he still has that 1 year of eligibility left. This is a guy who tested very, very well at the Combine and had a chance to talk to him, and he still wasn't happy with his numbers. He thought he could do better. And this is a guy who had like the 5th, I think it was the 5th fastest 40 time for linebackers. But also had like the 3rd overall fastest shuttle time out of everybody there. He's a big guy in terms of linebacker. Like he's 6'2", 250. Like he's a big boy, but this guy can move. And he's going to be right off the bat when he comes here, and like he'll probably come to training camp this year, go back to school, and then be back next year. Next year he'll be on special teams right away, and he's going to be a beast on specials. This is a solid pick. I really, really like this pick. He's going to be a good one in the CFL.
My favorite thing about him is, yes, the measurables, but also his attitude. Like that conversation you had with him, like he seems to be like a solid dude. He was electric factory all weekend at the Combine. Like he is a guy who loves football, wants to play at a high level, and will do anything the team asks. He kind of reminds me of the defensive version of a Joe. He just seems like he's that type of dude, and I can't wait to see what he looks like in Ryder Green.
There's a couple of guarantees in life. There's death, taxes, and the Riders taking a token kid from Saskatchewan. But this doesn't feel like that type of choice. This actually feels like legitimate 4th round pick who just happened to be from Saskatchewan. I loved we all watched him at camp. He looked like he belonged with some of those 1st, 2nd rounders, some of those high-end players. He didn't look out of place. So I'm very excited to see what he'll do. Obviously another year of college under his belt, and he'll be coming into a really good linebacking core with a fantastic defensive coordinator in Corey Mace. So could be interesting.
The Riders have had some very good luck picking guys in the 4th round lately with, go back to 2020 and it was AJ Allen and Kean Schaefer-Baker. So they've been able to find talent in these mid rounds, and Seth Hundeby, he's going to be a good one.
These are the rounds that J.O. cooks, as the kids today say.
Well, and what I've always believed this, and I heard this from a draft pundit years ago, and this was like in the NFL or maybe it was the NHL. Yeah, you're going to have your first round picks. They're going to come with all the hype. You don't win championships with your first round picks. You win it later in the drafts. If you can get good, solid players from your 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, if you get guys that contribute there, because everybody's going to have a good player with their first round pick. Everybody knows that.
Except Hamilton.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, this is where you win championships, is with these kind of depth players, these role players. And Hundeby is going to be a good one. Round 5, another linebacker. This one out of Windsor, Liam Hoskins. So same kind of thing with Hundeby. Except I know nothing about this guy. I know nothing about Liam Hoskins. Whether he's coming to camp this year or has more eligibility, I did not look that up. I will be completely honest with you. But again, one of those things can come in, be on special teams, and we have good Canadian linebackers. We have good depth there right now. So to come in and learn from some of those guys would be a good thing.
Well, and that's it. We've got a lot of Canadian linebackers on this roster, primarily for special teams purposes. But it's always good to be able to shuffle a guy in if they ever need to. So.
Yeah, when you're getting into these later rounds, these are the guys that you're preparing to be special teams beasts and hoping they take a step beyond that. If he can come in and do that as a 5th rounder, that's money.
In the 6th round, a defensive back out of Calgary. I know I'm going to butcher his last name as well, too. Gideon Ajay. I don't even know how to approach that, but Gideon out of Calgary, defensive back there. So again, one of those things where the Riders are going with 2 starting Canadians in the defensive backfield. So why not take another one here? Again, I was hoping for a Jackson Finley high in the draft, but if you're not going to do that, you got to take one later in the draft with what your plan is with Tavon Campbell and Nelson Lacombo and Jackson Ford, Jaden Dahlke, Kosi Onyeka, all those guys. Having another one down the pipeline is not a bad option. No pick in the 7th round because that went to Calgary in the Jake Mayer trade. So
Jake Mayer, who needs a 7th round pick when you got Jake Mayer?
I do. We'll leave it at that.
Alex really wants that pick back.
I want that pick back so bad. And then the 8th round, the final pick for the Riders, wide receiver Daniel Weeb out of the U of S Huskies, who had one hell of a combine. He was probably the star, at least of the first day for sure, but he was one of the stars of the entire weekend. And this is a guy who, he's a little guy. He's like 5'8". He reminds me of, everyone's going to say it, Weston Dressler, but he's that small, quick, shifty receiver. And I mean, the fact that he's a local guy absolutely helps. And when the Riders are finding guys like a Joe in the 7th round, why not throw an 8th round flyer on a guy for next season, really, and in Daniel Weeb?
Well, that's it. Like, and don't get me wrong, this does feel a little bit of, hey, Saskatchewan kid. Like, I could see them totally at the end of their draft board going, we got this guy from Ontario, or we can bring the Saskatchewan kid at the 8th. What's the harm type thing?
Now, that's what they did with Teal Orban back in the day. Just a
100%
PR
they did.
spot.
But this feels more than a PR spot, because you're right. He was very good at the combine. He's shown talent. Yes, he's undersized. I'm pretty sure if he was at least 2 or 3 more inches, he probably would have been probably a 7th round, if not 6th. So I'm glad we got him at 8th in the 8th round. So I can't wait to see what he can do on the field. And I think, though, with the new rules, I don't think you bring him into camp this year.
We were talking about that. So you can only bring in 100 players. plus your non-counters, which Canadian draft pick classifies as a non-counter for that number. But then if they come to camp this year, no matter, even if they go back to school, no matter what, they count to that 100 number next year. They're no longer a non-counter. So do you burn that eligibility on a guy who you know is going back to school next year and is still probably going to be a project? Like a guy like Seth Hundeby, you probably want in training camp this year, even if he is going back to school, because you know he's probably going to make the roster next year. Do you want to risk that with Daniel Wiebe? So it's one of those tricky balancing things.
I think especially after, because you have Mims coming in this year, who's now a counter because they're retroactively putting that rule in.
Yeah.
And so you already have your receivers, plus they have their non-counters, which I know they are bringing in some offensive players from the junior teams, both the Hilltops and the Thunder. I think this is a year you tell Wiebe, hey, like next year's your year, but I don't think you need to bring them in. If they do, they do, but I don't see the point of burning that year.
So overall, I think a pretty solid draft for Jeremy O'Day and Corey Mace, going after, I mean, kind of every position, really. They didn't load up on one specific. But I think it's guys that can come in and help now and guys that can help in the future. So it's to me, it's a solid draft, at least on paper, right?
At this point, given his history, I trust Jeremy O'Day's draft choices because he has shown, especially in those later rounds, those 4, 5, 6, 7, 8s, to pick guys that come in and contribute, whether it's this year, next year, whatever. There haven't been a lot of misses on his draft board over the years. So if he thinks he made the right choices, and he sure seemed confident at the post-draft event, then I'm happy to see what they bring to camp.
Well, we'll see some of these guys on the field next week as rookie camps begin in Saskatoon in just a week's time. So that's we made it. The off season's over. They're on the field next week. This is awesome. I love this time of year. Well, that's the opening kickoff presented by Kathy Feshton of Royal LePage Regina Realty. Let's jump to Remember That Guy, sponsored by District 306, Regina's tactical laser tag experience. Greg is going to try and stump us yet again with a player from Rider Lore. And I know you didn't struggle with this one, but you were kind of...
Not gonna lie, I panicked did this because we were at the draft thing. I'm like, oh crap, I haven't done Remember That Guy yet. So got home, did one, and then as me and Alex were waiting for Steve to get his technology working, I called an audible and changed it. So here we go. I think this is about a 1 or a 2.
One or two. Okay.
1 or 2. 1 or 2 advanced zone. All right, ready for Remember This Guy?
Let's go.
Started his pro career in 20... No, it's not Dennis Kyle, because Dennis Kyle did not start his career in 2019.
Oh, okay.
2,812 yards at Temple. Drafted in the 5th round in the 2019 NFL draft. Made stops in New York, New Orleans, Green Bay, and Washington. In 11 games in Ottawa, he had 625 yards and 284 receiving yards.
Can you say that one again?
In 11 games with Ottawa, he had 625 rushing yards and 284 receiving yards.
Yeah. I'm blanking on his name. I can see his face.
And my final hint, 207 yards in his Riders debut.
Rock Armstead.
Oh, yeah, right. Armstead. I was thinking somebody else for a second there.
I was thinking that with the Packers choice, and then you threw me off with began his career in 2019. I did not think he was that long ago.
Yep.
So I would have had it one guess ago, but I just questioned that 2019 stat.
You got Yeah, he got drafted by Jacksonville in the 5th round in 2019.
Yep. Fun fact. So we're going to talk about him, about his
That's why he did it.
couple games. Yeah. So once the Riders released him, I have a little list of kind of obscure players. I added him to that list because I'm like, you're going to do that at some point. You won't do it right away, but you'll do it at some point. So he's there.
No,
He's
I did it
on my
right away.
right here. I could share my screen. He's right there in between Colton Hunchak and Ryan Smith. So he's on my list of guys that I'm thinking you might use sometime.
You
share that
can
list
blame
with-
Dave for this one. Dave was the one who texted me and told me to do this earlier in the week, and I kind of forgot about it until we were sitting here and we're going through the list. I'm like, oh, right. And then that's why I called the audible.
Well, I got one. I got another one. I'm thrilled. That's 2 more than I thought I'd get.
See, and I thought you'd go with a Canadian this year or this week because of the draft. I really thought you
did.
would.
I
So
did.
had that
And
in
like
my
I
mind.
said, I did. And then, like I said, I changed it audible because I know we're going to talk about him. So I thought it'd be a good segue, especially considering this was right before we were going to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, Steve and I were there for his record-setting debut with the Riders in Calgary. That was a fun little 22-hour trip to Calgary.
Do you remember when that game started and it started off with a 69-yard Tommy
Yep.
Stevens touchdown run, and we all went, "Oh God, here we go again."
Because the Riders were
Yeah,
still they were at the end of their 7-game winless skid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the rest of that game happened, and it was delightful.
Chunk play after chunk play after chunk play. He had that big 34-yard run, but otherwise it was a bunch of 8-9-yard runs. Like that was unbelievable. Like that one game just looked like Corey Sheets in the Grey Cup. Like that's really what that one game looked like. Just chunk play after chunk play.
He played that game angry. You could tell he wanted to prove something after Ottawa let him go. And unfortunately, he just got hurt after that and was never the same.
Yeah, because the next game was against Ottawa, and that's where he got hurt. And that was the game where Thomas Bertrand-Houdon had quite a game, had a 35-yard touchdown, whatever it was, and had 60, 70 yards on the ground. So, yeah, Reichwell Armstead. Again, this guy, you say you went to Temple. Outside of, like, I don't know colleges. I don't know where anybody goes to college. I don't pay attention to that. Other than Rocky Butler, the first one, because he's the
Yeah,
only
you got Hofstra right away.
He's the only one from Hofstra ever. Well, if you give me Dennis Guile, I'll know that one from Central Missouri.
Yeah.
I'll know that one.
Okay.
Greg's now going to start looking for former riders from Central Missouri just to mess with you.
Probably.
I guarantee you, if I say the Colorado School of Mines, you know exactly what I'm talking about as well.
Well, which one? There's 2 of them.
There's 2. I only know the one.
There's Chad Freehoff.
Oh.
And then there's Isaac Harker.
Yeah. Archimedes, brother.
So there is 2 of those. Okay, so maybe I know 2 schools, Hofstra and the Colorado School of Mines.
That is
you
2 more than I
Rob
know.
Van Stone.
That's the closest I'll ever get to any kind of Rob Van Stone knowledge. He probably got this one right off the bat.
Oh, probably.
I was thinking his CFL career started in 2019.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a pro career. I word these the way I word
know
them
you
for a
do.
reason.
Actually, I don't even think he said pro career. I believe he just said he started his career, which would assume his pro career.
Yeah.
I was thinking
But I was
still
right.
kind of a young guy.
Right?
Although that was like 6 years ago, so not so young anymore. Old 30-year-old
Oh.
guy.
I felt real old today at that draft thing when Jackson Ford's favorite player growing up was
Rob Bag.
Corey
Oh.
Sheets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mitch Pickton
like-
saying it was Rob Bag.
Yeah. Rob Bag and Weston Dressler. I'm going, oh God. That's like Yarmer Yager saying his favorite player growing up is Yarmer Yager.
I don't know. I felt kind of young at that thing. Not gonna lie.
Well, looking around the crowd, there's definitely a requirement to find a younger fan base. There's that for sure.
Okay, well there we go. Remember that guy by District 306, Regina's Tactical Laser Tech Experience. which leads us to our Churchill Brewing Company odds and end zones. And we start with Mr. Remember that guy, Raquel Armstead, released last week by the Riders, along with Rondell Bothroyd, defensive lineman. Rondell, we hardly knew ye. You're not coming to training camp. But the big one, obviously, was about Armstead. It was kind of a Friday news dump where it was in the afternoon. Shocked a lot of people. I don't think it's shocking that he's no longer on the team. I'm shocked that he didn't at least get to training camp. I think of the timing of it more than anything. But at the same time, to me, honestly, he was never going to be the starter here. It's AJ Ouellette's running back position. Like, he's the starter. They're paying him a boatload of money. And I know it's best players play, and fans are all over that too. Best players should play. Should, yes. In theory, that's 100% right. In practicality, that does not happen. There's politics. There's stuff going on behind the scenes. When you're paying a guy marketing money, he's going to play. You're not just paying a guy non-cap money to not play. You're just not doing that.
But
So-
even then, I think it was Daryl Davis's piece for the Leader Post talking about Raquel Armstead. It wasn't surprising. It was surprising how long it took. I think as the season went on and Raquel was injured and when he got healthy again, the fact that he wasn't starting and wasn't playing in that two-headed monster where it was all AJ and maybe one or two to Raquel, he thinks he can be a starter in this league. And based on his play, I think he has an argument. That said, well, Daryl even said in his piece, he got in a fight with one of the coaches in front of the media. Like, Corey Mace and O'Day, even tonight we're talking about they drafted players that fit in that locker room. I don't think Raquel fit in that locker room after
High
he wasn't
character
the starter.
guys is what they use. High character.
And we're talking about a guy who also was released from Ottawa reportedly because of behavior issues in that locker room as well. And if we're looking at a team and a roster that Corey Mace wants to build around locker room chemistry, you need to be able to have both the on-field play and the attitude and good behavior to go along with it. If you're somebody that is upsetting the locker room, you are not going to last long within this particular version of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They have made it very clear that that is an important part of what they do and how they do it. And to be honest, that Calgary game was fun. And being there was fantastic. Watching him rush off for 200 plus yards, you don't see that very often. But he didn't really do much after that. A couple of highlight plays, a couple of fun plays here and there, but he just wasn't that same guy, even when he was given the odd rush here or there. Now, I do understand as a running back, you tend to need a few carries to get into a groove, and he wasn't getting that either. So some of that is on Mueller not using him. But this was not a shock to anybody who's been paying attention.
And that's another thing. Were they going to use him? No. They made it very clear last year. Yes, they did have two American running backs on the roster to start the year when it was Ouellette and the fullback Clint Rakovich. But they used him so seldomly, he was just a blocker. And then when you had a Joe block instead, well, I don't need that American spot there. I can use the American spot somewhere else. When they brought, when AJ Ouellette was healthy and he came back and resumed his starting spot, Raquel Armstead was the backup. Did they use him? No. So if you're not going to use him, why have him?
I also think that the writing was on the wall when they went out and signed the guy that replaced him in Ottawa.
Kalen LeBourne.
Yeah, like it's like, that's an interesting signing. So you would think with LeBourne, and then they had Penix on the roster. They've signed another running back, I believe, top of my head.
Mario Anderson.
So they obviously are still looking for that number two, and I'm going to guarantee you LeBourne, Anderson, and Penix all come in at a cheaper price tag than Raquel Armstead.
So where does that leave the Riders running back room? Well, exactly where we kind of expected it to be. AJ Ouellette is the starter, and then whoever is the best out of training camp will be the number 2 guy. So again, probably leaning LeBourne to start. Pencil him in now. Won't use Penn, but there's a chance one of the other guys can come in and take that spot. So,
and realistically, having Bertrand Houdon to fill in whenever you need him is a great problem to have.
And he's going to
be
be
on this passport.
Yeah, he's going to be on the team on the active roster anyway. He's going to play specials. So you don't need to have that second American running back on there just to have a backup. So as long as you have Bertrand Houdon, you don't need it. So there was never going to be a realistic spot for Armstead on this team in 2025. I just thought he'd at least get to training camp, and then he'd be one of the cuts. I thought that's how it was going to play out. But if that was the plan, then I mean, I get it. Might as well just do it now.
I have a sneaking suspicion his agent probably realized what was going to happen and wants to get onto a training camp where he actually had a shot. And if that's the case, or if the Riders just decided, you know what, it's not fair to bring him in, even better, because that shows that they actually are they care about the guys actually making another team.
And that leads us into the signings from the last week, and mentioned Mario Anderson, the running back. He was one of the ones that was signed on draft day, actually. So we'll get him in training camp. 2 fun ones here, both on the D line. First off, Justin Jefferson. At first glance, wait, what? Oh,
Yep.
Yeah, not that Justin Jefferson, not that top 2 receiver in the world, Justin Jefferson. This is a D lineman. But if he can do to offensive lines what Justin Jefferson, the receiver, does to defensive backs, I'm all for it.
The real question is he gritty if he scores a defensive touchdown?
He has to. You got to live up to your namesake, right?
Well, I also think the last time we had a Jefferson on our defensive line, it turned out okay.
Winnipeg is currently licking their lips for 5 years down the road.
And the other defensive lineman that was signed, Octavius Oxendine, already on the Riders all-name team. That's a fantastic name. Guy out of Kentucky.
I almost wish that Roland wasn't wearing 0 so they could give him 00. Just because of his OO name. That'd be amazing, but you can't have 00 and 0 on the same roster. So. Stupid roster rules.
Thanks, Trudeau. So there's a defensive. I knew you'd like that. So there's a defensive lineman. A couple more signed there. So to me, that shows that that's going to be a real interesting battle in training camp. Is defensive line. Who are going to be the ends? Because it's going to be a rotation of probably 7 or 8 players on the entire D line on the active roster, and they're probably going to keep 1 or 2 on the practice roster as well. But they need to find somebody that can get after the quarterback, because while they did at the beginning of the year get after the quarterback, it wasn't consistent at the end of the year.
Yeah, when your leading sack guy is a defensive tackle, it's not good for your pass rush. So, yeah, hopefully they can find that guy to really start wrecking quarterbacks' timing.
And not just a defensive tackle, but when that leading sack number was it 6?
6.
That's not going to get it done. And we know that he likes a rotation. There's going to be a lot of new faces in that defensive end spot. It's going to be fun to see that battle at camp. But I do want to give a shout out to the Riders social media team. At least lately, it seems like they're having a little bit of fun with some of the signings. You know, the Doc Ock joke, the Matrix joke with Mario Anderson, some of those pop culture references, and it's fun to see them at least try to have a little bit of fun. You know, it's a good look.
Actually, I had to laugh today when they posted that the social media team has nothing to do with the draft.
I think it's the Commanders. They always post about that every single NFL draft, about how the admin needs to, I don't know, tip off the picks because they know everything that's going on and they have no idea. They're just people sitting at a computer or on their phone waiting to get the information. So couple other signings, offensive lineman Jameer Ross Johnson, an American there. So another guy in for the tackle competition there. And a receiver, Jaden Horace. So continuing to bring guys in, and let's see who can step up in training camp and make the roster. But making mention of an offensive lineman there, Trevor Reed, last year's left tackle, was waived by the Minnesota Vikings. The Riders still have his CFL rights through this year, going into free agency next year in 2026. So I know he's probably going to hold out hope for another NFL shot. Obviously, if you're Jeremy O'Day, you've already been on the phone with his agent saying, hey, by the way, assuming he's coming back to Canada, or assuming he wants to, if this doesn't work, he's coming back here. We want him back. I can't imagine they wouldn't want him back after he was a stud for us last year. It took us how many years to find a left tackle? We finally found one. Played through injury a few times. Like, there was a couple times where he could barely get back up, and the guy just powered through it. He was excellent last year. I would love to see him back. Obviously, I want him to realize his NFL dream and make it in the NFL, but selfishly as a Rider fan, I want him back here. If there's any chance that he can come back up here, we're almost laughing with our O-line depth, which, looking at last year, we were laughing because what else could happen, right?
This is just further proof that the Minnesota Vikings wouldn't know a good football player if it jumped up and bit them in the ass. I thank you very much for not making me have to support somebody in that ugly purple color. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I think Reed's going to obviously be patient. I don't think the Riders are. I'm sure they would love to see him in camp, obviously, so he's ready to go. But I think they're going to let him wait out some mini camps, see if there's any teams looking for an injury replacement guy. But yeah, I think he's going to be here before the end of the year. I don't get me wrong, I would love to see him latch on somewhere, but considering how fast Minnesota let him go, I have a sneaking suspicion the demand is not out there right now.
Well, they did call it a non-football injury, so whatever that means, that's all that we've seen out of it. But Trevor Reed, as of yesterday, just had his birthday yesterday. He's only 25. Like, this guy is still very, very young, and he's going to get another NFL look somewhere. I really think he will. So will we see him this year? Maybe, but it might not be until, post Labor Day when the practice rosters expand and you can bring in guys and whatnot. Not saying he would be on the practice roster, but if they haven't found an absolute stud at left tackle, well, here comes your savior left tackle. You can bump your current starter down to the PR or something like that. So I think he'll end up somewhere, at least for training camp in the NFL, but otherwise would really like to see him back in Saskatchewan. So again, if he's coming back up to Canada, Riders have his rights until next year. So there we go. And that's it. Was going to do the ranking of the 5 worst draft picks by Jeremy O'Day, but he's just had such good drafts and I think this draft is one of them, at least on paper, that I'm not going to look at a couple misses, because every single team has misses, usually high in the draft, and it's not very often that Jeremy O'Day has a swing and a miss very high in a draft.
It's not like he's drafting for Hamilton here.
Hamilton's just taking a bunch of pot shots everywhere.
I'm used to him taking the shot at the Bombers, not at Winnipeg. Not at Hamilton.
But
Oh,
speaking
don't
of
worry.
Winnipeg,
The Bombers will catch strays. Don't worry.
speaking of Winnipeg, we should mention there are less than 2 weeks left in the early bird price for the Banjo Bowl in September. What is it? $425 right now per
We're
person.
25 until May 11th. So
Yeah.
a couple
So
weeks.
when training camp opens, the price goes up to $450 a spot. You get a chance to win a customized rider jersey. We've never done that before. We've always just had a bunch of prizes. This year we wanted to do it big. We're doing a big trip. Let's do a big prize. So
Well, we're still going to have
customized
other
rider
prizes.
jersey.
And then still
Oh,
prizes.
tons of prizes.
Yeah.
Tons of prizes. Tons of gifts from our friendly sponsors like Churchill. You know, so it'll be a good time.
They always get us going first thing in the morning on the way to Banjo Bowl. It'll just be in the afternoon now.
Imagine how good it's going to be when it's not at 3:00 in the morning. Instead, we're hopping on the bus at
Some of those
11 or noon.
3 a.m. shenanigans are kind of fun.
That's true.
We
That's
can't
true.
get into details of what kind of shenanigans they are, but if you read between the lines, I think you can figure that out.
You want to find out? Jump on the bus.
That's right. So
Partake in the shenanigans with us.
shoot us a DM, shoot us an email, pifflespodcast@gmail.com. The Banjo Bowl bus trip is presented by Engelheim Tours and District 306. Again, it's $425 for per person on double occupancy. Ends on May 11th, goes up to $450 after. All we need is $100 deposit per person, and then the rest, July, I think, Steve?
July 1st. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to go to the Banjo Bowl, it should be a pretty good one again this year. If it's anything like last year was one hell of a game where the Riders had a chance to win. And this is going to be the one. This will be the one. They're finally going to win it again.
Hey, we have a Jefferson. We might have a Jefferson on the defensive line, and he might be able to find the end zone faster than Willie ever did.
That was one of the longest, most strung out touchdown returns I've ever seen. And that was coming towards us when we were in the end zone.
Yep.
And we were like cheering, and then we kind of like stopped cheering because he still wasn't in. And, and then he finally went in, and then of course everybody lost their mind again. So that was fun.
And then he came running up the steps.
Yeah. But we'll actually be on the Riders side of for tickets this year. We'll be on the Riders side of the bench instead of the end zone. So should be a better view, and should be a lot of fun, as it always is. So if you want to go to the Banjo Bowl, shoot us a message, and we'll get you on the list. All right. Well, until then, till next week, we'll leave it there, because next week we're talking about on-field stuff with rookie camps, and we're going to get some predictions going next week. Who are going to be your rookie camp standouts? Who's going to be Keith Tostin for Steve? Or okay, well, I'll give you this one. You did call the Corey Sheets, you did call the Weston Dressler ones. You picked those guys in training camp, so I'll give you those ones. But
and I stand by Keith Tostin has the highest yards per carry average in CFL history. So one game, what was it? He had the 180-yard touchdown run. It was brilliant.
60-yarder or whatever.
Oh, it was
That's
great.
the one that he
could have been a legend.
Antoine Prono too, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, It was. Bowled him over. It was fantastic.
Welcome to the league.
Could have been a legend.
So we'll have predictions. We still haven't even gotten the Riders theme nights. So they're
not doing any this year. They're tired of us making fun of them.
That's
you guys are. They're coming out tomorrow. Let's
probably
coming out tomorrow.
So when that happens, I'll have my annual rant on it about picking something other than country night.
Do you already have it written?
It's literally the same argument as last year and the year before and the year before that. So it's an evergreen post, honestly.
Which rant is going to come first? The theme nights or the bike rant?
Theme nights has to come up before the bikes.
Yeah. I haven't done a bike rant one because they don't use them anymore. They don't ask anymore.
Yeah.
Again, probably because they got tired of your rants.
I should go back to one of the first years of Piffles podcast and bring back that rant just to play the audio of that, because man, I got so mad about that.
We should bring back the rant section. It was good times.
I'm for it.
I had a lot of problems with you people, and you're going to hear about them.
It is our 10th anniversary, so our 10th season, so we could celebrate by doing some nostalgia.
Some throwbacks. We'll do it.
As long as we don't bring back the Al Bradbury rant. We'll leave that one in the dark.
Oh, that's saved on my phone. I got it somewhere in here. I'll take that one out right away. Listen to that for the 10 seconds of gloriousness that one is.
That one comes with a parental advisory.
Yeah, that one doesn't get put on the podcast anymore. That goes behind the paywall. But we'll leave it there with the Piffles podcast. Of course, brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. And of course, special thanks go out to Kathy Festian of Roy LePage Regina Realty, Churchill Brewing Company, District 306, which is Regina's tactical laser tag experience, and Bigfoot Vodka for their support making everything possible. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts, watching on SaskTel Max TV on demand, watching on YouTube. And thank you, Chris Strevler, for everything you do for this show, including helping us with our ending here with Ghost Behind Your Mind by Tyler Gilbert.
Thank you for being such a big supporter and fan of the CFL and myself personally.